Awesome. Welcome, guys, to this probably now fourth episode of the podcast already. I'm a little bit red-headed if you're watching this on YouTube because I just got home from workout, had to kind of rush a little bit to get here. But I'm really excited for today because today we have a very special guest, someone who I probably didn't know 2 weeks ago, but was so interesting that I decided to invite you to a podcast. So yeah, today I'm joined by Jerry Sam. Jerry, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for having me. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
No worries. Would you like to, as an introduction, tell a little bit about yourself, what you do, stuff like that?
Sure. I right now I'm a facilitator, and the reason why I like the word facilitating, not coaching, is because I think coaching implies me trying to fix people, me knowing better than someone else. So I've been really against that word for a long time. The reason why I like the word facilitation is because it implies me helping people to find their own answers to their own questions. So I'm a human behavioral facilitator. I help people facilitate their own life, helping them to understand themselves. That's what I do as a living. But there's many other things. I love the quote. Well, many people know it, right? If you want to build wealth, have different income streams. So I have a rental portfolio. I have e-commerce business. I'm starting up another one soon. I've got a long-term project that I'm working on with a friend. As I mentioned earlier, it's a mental health app. Um, Yeah, my wife is studying psychiatry, and I'd love to collaborate with her in some ways to start doing workshops too. So mental health is a big side of mine. Um, how I got into mental health is I've been studying mental health, personal development for a very long time, even during high school. I think I started taking a lot more serious because I started taking a lot more serious when I had my first job in corporate, which was about 5, 6 years ago, because I was obviously earning money, and then the money was able to afford me to pay for courses and certification and all sorts of material. So yeah, I used to work at corporate, and then that time it was, I just knew that wasn't for me, but I had used it as a way to make money to invest it into different assets, into material, to help me to bring me where I am. At that time, I was also gaining a lot of weight. So it was when I gain weight, I know that something isn't right for my soul, because I'm really into fitness. Yeah, and even I took fitness to quite a high level. I did Olympic weightlifting for my province, so I've got provincial colors for it. Yeah, Olympic weightlifting. What else can I share about myself? Um, I think how I got into personal development. Yes, I got into from high school, but as Aristotle says, that which is empty, we want to fulfill, right? So I think I really want to fill that void. In other words, your void becomes your values, right? That's what he's saying. So my void of emotional support from my parents, I think, really led me to seek personal development. And nothing's really missing, right? You see. So I was getting parenting just a different form, right? Because you got to understand, my parents are Chinese immigrants. So I'm first generation, right? So when they immigrated, obviously the focus was just on financial success and financial gain, right? So they really worked their asses off, just to look after my sister and I, and they were able to afford us to incredible schools, and and I'm grateful for that. I mean, that really opened up my eyes to entrepreneurship, socializing with with other people, and learning more about the world. Um, so I would often see, when I was in the rugby field, I would see other fathers supporting their kids, and I would back of my mind question like, well, where's my dad, right? But I soon have realized that was really a great blessing because all the authors, all the works that I had studied, they were all male figures, right? So I soon realized that nothing's actually fucking missing, and that's been one hell of a journey. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, bro. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jerry. I think there's a very interesting point which I took away from what you just said in like the last 10, 15 seconds. And that has to do a bit with the way in which we're kind of brought up, as well as the influence that our childhood has on the rest of our life. So I know you're a very smart guy. You probably know a whole lot about this, but what would you say that maybe are some good takeaways for people who have had maybe a rough childhood and are really struggling later in life? Like, how do you think that the childhood influences people later in their life?
Mm. So just going back to what I was saying, I think it's very unrealistic. I think this links completely with what you're saying. I think it's very unrealistic to expect my dad to be every role, right? And we see that a lot in romantic relationships, in personal relationships with a partner. I want my partner to be the cleaner, be the worker, be the traditional housewife, but at the same time go make money. At the same time, play sports with me. At the same time, do some to be my business partner as well. I just think that's becoming unrealistic. That's really unrealistic and unhealthy. Um, so it's really about seeing that the forms of support that you're looking for is not going to be from one person. That's what I soon realized. It's going to be from many other people. Um, because our fixation on something is what creates a depression. It was what creates this emotional turmoil. Um, yeah, so that's probably one tip I would probably offer other people is to not be fixated on a specific form and see where you're getting it and see the beauty in why you're getting it in this way and not from others.
Do you maybe have an example of that? Could be from your life or not, from like general.
Yeah, so exactly. Just going back to my example of my father. My father was definitely there for me financially, right? Because they paid for my school fees and all that kind of stuff. But I had an expectation that I wanted him to be for me emotionally as well. But that's not fair on him, right? That's actually quite selfish, right? So where I was getting the emotional support was from the YouTube videos I was watching, from John DiMartini, from Elliot Hulse, from Yahya Bakar, from Tony Robbins, from Vishen Lakiani, even some of my friends' fathers, even some of the teachers in school. They're all male figures, right? So it was all
Hmm,
there.
that's mhm.
The father figures all there, just in a different form, right? Mm.
Yeah, no, that was actually what I wanted to ask you. So you kind of mean that the roles that initially you thought your father would fulfill were actually fulfilled by different people, not in like very direct form.
100%. That's exactly what I'm saying, right? And I thank that because if I dad had to fulfill all roles, right, it'd be very isolated, and I don't think he'd able to teach me what I want to know in life, right? The benefit of me having it in many different forms, it just teaches me a lot more entrepreneurship, being also relate to other people, right? Because my father doesn't speak English great, right? But the fact that I'm learning from speaking to other people also enhances my English at the time, but also it I see the world, see more of the world instead of this tiny bubble, right? This little echo chamber, right? Mm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because and even beyond this point, like let's say that in your childhood you have the same situation as you, and you're expecting, for example, your father to fulfill a certain role, but it doesn't end up happening. Even then, you might fill up that space with someone later in your life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's all there is to it, if that makes sense. Because
Mm.
you have been in the self-development space or personal development space for a very long time, probably even almost as long as how old I am, which is very funny to say that. But um, have you noticed that throughout your personal development journey, the kind of people that you sort of took their paradigm from, and paradigm for the people who don't know kind of means your worldview, how you see the world, how you think about things. Do you see that those people have changed for you, like the beginning versus now? Like what is an example maybe of something which you drastically your paradigm drastically changed in when you started versus now?
Yeah, 100%. So great mentor of mine is definitely Dr. John DeMartini, and he's definitely changed the way I see life, right? Again, that's probably one of the reasons why I'm grateful. I can be grateful for my father not being there for me emotionally, right? Um, the world is dualistic. It has, and we like labeling it, right? It's not about, I've soon realized that life isn't about chasing happiness. The more you chase happiness, the sadder you become. I think I wrote down one of my ex posts. So it's really understanding that life is almost like a magnet. There's no such thing as an only positive magnet, and there's no such thing as an only negative magnet, right? If you take a magnet, no matter how many times you cut a thing in half, you're going to get positive, negative, right? But the illusion that most people live by is that they expect to have an only positive magnet and throw away the only negative magnet. But those things never exist. So that's been one thing that has helped me in my life. It's helped to be realistic, right? A lot of people say it's about being optimistic. I don't really agree. Because when we're too optimistic, we only take action and we don't reflect. But if we're too pessimistic, we also we become paralyzed by analysis, right? So true realisticness, if that's even a word, is about being optimistic and pessimistic at the same time, right? You're taking information, right, from the pessimistic side, and you're taking the action, right? So I believe in doing both. Both are very important, right? So fear is important in some ways because it helps us to analyze our risk, right? People who are too optimistic are they think they think they're on top of the world, right? They think they're what's the word? Infallible, if that's the correct word.
Invincible.
Right. Invincible. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So it's about both. Yeah. I think another takeaway also from Robert Holden, he's a famous psychologist in the UK. I think this was also a key moment in my personal development was that quote. He said, "No amount of self-improvement makes up for lack of self-acceptance."
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not about improving because by virtue of saying improving, you're actually saying that there's something wrong with you. I need fixing. But you don't need fixing. You just need to see why am I doing this, right? It's about understanding, right? No judgment. Um, and how I discovered that was actually that was I was going through quite a rough patch. That was when my now wife, we were dating at the time, and she had broken up with me. So I had really just like put all my efforts in gym and personal development, just really understanding myself. But until this day, I really truly appreciate her for breaking up with me. I've said this quite a few times to you, and people just don't understand what that means. Like, how can you be grateful for your girlfriend breaking up with you? Um, but I can really appreciate that, and I would definitely, if I was back then, I would even want to break up with myself. Um, yeah, it's just I can see the complete upsides to her head to her breaking it with me. So I do thank that moment. I can really appreciate it. Yeah, because I think at that time I was just a little boy, and she said to me, "It feels like I'm dating a boy and not a man." I didn't really understand that, but when she broke up with you, it was the pain drove me. Right, pain is important. Pain's a great driver. Kind of drove me into like just reading a shit ton of books, going on courses, watching courses. And that's how I discovered the quote, no amount of self-improvement makes up for lack of self-acceptance. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, I think that's one of the most interesting things you shared on our first call that we had before this podcast.
Yeah.
Um, because, and I think there's literally a term which I read about this, which is called optimistic realism. So kind of being optimistic, but then, like you said, at the same time also being realistic, sometimes a bit pessimistic in order to be realistic. Um, but I think, and I'm a big fan of kind of like studying how reality works, as I'm sure you are too, especially related to mental health. And I think the reason that people have difficulty understanding being grateful for experiences like the one you just shared. So, for example, being grateful for that your girlfriend broke up with you, is because we don't really understand how cause and effect truly works. Because everyone thinks it's just as simple as, for example, the cause is that you do a certain action, and the effect is that something happens which you want. So, for example, the cause is you, I don't know, read a book. The effect is you become smarter. But it doesn't necessarily always have to be this linear, because, like you mentioned, the cause can be that, for example, your girlfriend breaks up with you. The effect could either be that you completely become depressed and you don't really see the joy in life anymore, and it just all becomes a downward spiral from there. What happened instead is you, for some reason, had enough um, maybe optimism to really make something out of that and really start improving yourself. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because when you take this principle of everything is a duality, you can basically start to look at anything you're doing right now, regardless of whether you think it's successful or not, and find the opposite. So even if there's someone out there nowadays, maybe even someone listening to this podcast, and they feel like they're really struggling with getting results, achieving whatever they want to achieve, getting close to their goals, there's always something on the other side which they're able to find, which is positive. And I think that really helps a ton. But at the other side, that's also something interesting to be said about that, because like you said, pain is an interesting or effective motivator as well. So I'm curious, because you have been in the self-development space for a long time. I guess you have observed quite a lot of people go through the same process. Do you see a pattern where people start out from a certain type of motivation and then it changes over time as they develop as an individual, if that makes sense?
Just repeat that a bit for me.
For sure. So, over the past few years of doing this, have you seen a pattern of the types of motivation that people have and the results they have? So, for example, do you see a lot of people who are motivated from pain? So they really don't like their life. They want to make a change because they're not happy. And there's also people who possibly are happy and want to get more happy. Like, do you see any differences in results?
Um, I think I would want to first start off with defining motivation and inspiration. I think motivation and inspiration are very different things. I won't say they're opposite, but there are different layers. Motivation is someone telling you to do something that you don't want to do, right? For example, my mom motivates me to, when I was in school, she would motivate me to go study, motivate me to read books, motivate me to go brush my teeth or make my bed. So motivation, you're seeing it's a pushing effect, right? Inspiration, on the other hand, is a calling from within. If you break down the word in spirit, a spirit from within, right? So you naturally are drawn to go do this. Like a kid, for example, who loves playing video games, right? He doesn't have to be reminded to go play video games. Have you ever heard of a 10-year-old kid having to be reminded by his mother to go play video games? It's never heard of, right? But then people would say, oh, that's an addiction, that's a label. Can you see how the labels come in? The authorities, like, we shouldn't
Mm,
play games. But I don't agree with that. I mean, like, if you look at people like PewDiePie, he's worth over like $50 million, number one YouTuber in the world, and he made a living from playing video games, despite his mother hounding him. Can you get a proper job? Can you do this and that? Right? Societal pressure, right? So it's it's really seeing what, I mean, this goes back to purpose and all that kind of stuff, but it's really seeing what are you drawn to, what energizes you, and making a living out of that, right? Um, yeah, sorry, I got sidetracked. So does that sort of answer your question a little bit?
Well, I do think, yeah, because I made a slight error in mixing motivation and inspiration. And to be honest, I think it's a very good reason that I did that. And for the very aware listeners, you can probably observe that the same thing happened, which I just talked about. The cause of me asking the question and the effect of him answering the question led to something completely different, but I think it's good. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
because the inspiration, like you mentioned with PewDiePie, is something that, in my opinion, is much more powerful and should be something that you should want to aim for a lot more than motivation. So do you maybe have some first of all, maybe share a little bit about your experience with finding your purpose, and then maybe some tips for people
Mm,
who are a little bit confused about what they really should do and what their purpose is.
right. I just want to first start off with motivation is not bad. Motivation is important. We do need to experience pain, and pain is a great driver. Um, so in saying that, a lot of people say, I need to find my purpose. I need to find my purpose. So what they end up doing is sitting on their hands, warming up their, sitting on their hands and thinking what their purpose is. Purpose really isn't this mystical thing. Purpose is really just action. What are you constantly demonstrating, right? What are you constantly demonstrating that energizes you? What do you exactly what Steve Jobs said, right? Look backwards and connect the dots. Right. If I look backwards
Mm.
now, I can definitely see personal development was a big thing in my life. I mean, I was studying this during high school already, despite me I'd studied engineering in school. I'd worked in corporate for a finance company. I did a bit of programming, but my life was always pointing towards personal development. And I could see it because I was reading books on personal development. So in terms of like finding purpose, it's really about paying attention to how you're surrounding yourself. What are you spending money, energy on? Right. So pay attention to yourself, right? The Oracle of Delphi in Greek philosophy, they said, know thyself, right? So in other words, know what your priorities are. Your purpose isn't outside of you, it's actually within you. Look within, right? Your purpose isn't about getting a Lamborghini, buying a billion
Hmm.
dollar house, or getting $1 billion or whatever it is, right? That's I'm not saying don't do those things, right? But that's outside yourself, not inside yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
I
really
hope
good
that sort
point.
of helps. Right,
Yeah, it
right.
does. Because there's one thing I heard about this as well, and that's I think it was that your passion or your purpose, either one of the two, maybe um what would you say the difference between those two is, purpose and passion?
Um, Purpose for me is one-sided. So I'm passionate about playing soccer, right? So it means I'm willing to sort of chase the positives and avoid the negatives. But even if you look at the dictionary definition of passion, right? The etymology. So I like studying words. The etymology
Hmm.
of passion means to suffer, right? So I think that's where it comes from, like the passions of the Christ, right? So it's suffering. So passion has a lot to do with suffering. Purpose, on the other hand, is about embracing both the pain and the pleasure, right? Suffering is sort of distorting the emotions, like sort of differentiating emotions, separating the emotions, whereas purpose is integrating the emotions, right? So purpose for me, it's like even though um people say I'm a shitty speaker, right? But I'm still going to pursue personal development, right? Even though some people did not like a session I did with them, I'm still going to go see clients, right? Or even better, so this is a better example. So during weightlifting, I would injure myself, but I would still pursue the weightlifting, the fitness, right? But if my mother had to be a weightlift and hurt her back, she would give up immediately, right? So see, can you see that's a difference? So you sort of understanding that where you're seeing feedback, that's your purpose. If you see it as a setback, that's not real. That's sort of like not meant for you, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm
Right.
just writing this one down. This
You're
is brilliant.
right, right. Because when you're purposeful, you're automatically disciplined, reliable, and focused, right? So I would really stop people from saying, "Oh shit, I need to be more hardworking. I need to be more focused. I need to be more reliable." Right? You're a human being with all traits, right? You have human and you have ability to demonstrate all sorts of emotion, right? And what that means is using these things as feedback to guide you back to path instead of labeling yourself, oh shit, I need to be more hardworking at this. Because then you're living an illusion, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So use it as to guide you. Where am I disciplined? But I'm quite disciplined when it comes to personal development. I read a lot of books on this. I watch YouTube videos on this, right? I'm constantly on Twitter trying to grow my brand, right? I'm on this call for you. I'm reliable, right? So rather ask those questions, where am I demonstrating this, than actually saying, than labeling yourself, oh, I'm lazy, right? So break those labels, right? Let let nature do its work, right? Live by design, not by duty.
Bro, you just throw these crazy wise short-liners at me like it's nothing. I really like that,
Thanks.
man. And I think especially that is a huge lesson that we could probably talk about for another 2 hours. The thing about feedback. Because I think on our first call as well, you shared with me that everything is basically a form of feedback. Could you maybe explain that to people who've probably never heard of that?
Sure. So feedback is sort of like a mechanism that gives you an indication, a sign, right, to where you need to go next, right? Um, so that when I say see failure as feedback, sort of let it be a guiding post of what next step you should take or can take, right? Um, so when you're living according to purpose, right? Sure, you may stumble, but you may not necessarily give up, right? So I've stumbled a lot of times, right? My marketing isn't great, all right, but that's a stumble, but it's not me giving up. Like I stumble when I'm doing weightlifting. Oh, I've hurt my back. That's a bit of a stumble. It's not me giving up, right? So I'm using this as feedback to maybe I need to weightlift in a different way. I need to maybe get stronger with my legs. Sort of maybe need to adjust my technique, right? It's all feedback. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that kind of relates to what you just said about the purpose, because whenever you start seeing things as feedback instead of, like you said, setback, it starts to open up a lot more doors because otherwise what you're doing is continuously just quitting after everything that doesn't go your way. But I think truthfully
Even
that,
see,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, you finish. So even see giving up as a feedback. You will likely give up on things that don't matter to you. You'll likely keep pursuing something, even when you stumble on something that is very important to you. So even giving up is a very big label. Oh, that person just gives up. You know, you're a loser, right? Or not you. Of course, you're not a loser.
I was like, what
Um,
is this personal
but
attack?
but but you get what I'm saying, right? But to always label someone, oh, you must never give up. You must always keep fighting. That's a very animal way of seeing life, right? Start seeing where you keep being consistent. See where you're being consistent. Instead of saying, I need to be consistent, where am I consistent? Right? Bring it back to self. I think that's a way more powerful question of asking, where am I consistent rather than saying, I need to be consistent, right? Because then again, it comes back to what I'm saying, you're living by design and not by duty, right?
Hmm. I think I do understand that because you kind of gave me a little epiphany in the middle of this. So what you're saying is instead of trying to create or change things on the outside based on what you think you should do, you can look at what pretty much is already natural for you, which is inside of you.
Exactly. And the key word you said there was should. Every should is an authority telling you to do something. Behind that should is an authority. You're subordinating yourself to an outside authority. Pay attention to your words. Oh, I said should, yes. So should is this is indicating where did I get this from? It's probably from my mom who says I need to always have do things a certain way. Right. Right. Because then you start understanding what your beliefs are and you start challenging them. Right.
Hmm. That's a great one. I don't know if you do already work with some people like this, like on a serious coaching setting.
Hmm.
Um,
I do, yeah.
You do? Oh, that's perfect. I kind of expect that as well. Have you noticed some common patterns, maybe among beginners, maybe among more experienced people, with these kind of beliefs?
Yeah. So a lot of labeling, um, they're but all the labeling really comes down to this. I mean, you're asking for generalization, so it's really coming from having unrealistic expectations. It really comes down to that, to the whole magnet thing I was saying. It's chasing a positive without a negative, right? It's chasing happiness, not realizing their depression is actually giving them feedback. Again, it's a feedback mechanism. And we spoke about feedback mechanisms, right? And there really are for me feedback mechanisms. This is what John described. The first feedback mechanism is psychology. If you don't listen to your psychology, your physiology kicks in, right? If you don't listen to your physiology, your sociology kicks in. And if you don't listen to your sociology, the theology kicks in, right? In the words God, right? So it's about really listening. Everything in life is trying to guide us back into purpose, into our own path, right? There is only one unique you, right?
Where did you find that those feedback things? Was that in this book?
I think it's in his books. Yeah, I think it's in books or even his workshops. Yeah, the Values Factor is a really good book.
Yeah,
Maybe
the
it's there.
values
Yeah.
factor for sure. I'll probably link it
Mm.
in the description of Spotify and YouTube for the people that want to check it out. But I'm kind of curious because I do understand the psychology part. So you said they start out at psychology. If there's something's wrong, you have to pick up on that. If that doesn't work, it kicks into your physiology, so like your body. Then sociology. What necessarily does that mean, and how do you maybe have an example of how such a feedback mechanism would work, and not specifically about sociology?
So sociology would perhaps mean friends, family, right? And if you don't listen to that, sort of some deity you think a deity is like sort of um, punishing you or doing something, right? So for me, for example, I mean, um, let's go back to Olympic weightlifting because it was a big part of my life, right? So pride, pride and shame. So I was kind of prideful, right, in lifting, and I'm not listening to that, right? I'm going to keep doing it, and it's fine. I'm the best, right? So I'm not listening to that. So the physiology kicks in. The physiology would be crap. Now I've twisted my ankle, right? He's sort of saying, and if I despite twisting my ankle and I keep going, um, maybe my wife sees me, says, "Dude, what are you doing? Right? You're gonna really break a leg or something if you carry on like that." Can you sort of see what I'm saying? But if I
Hmm.
carry on and not listening to that, um, I may have broken a bone, for example, and we think that's the theology part coming in, right? But I don't think I've gotten so far as the theology because my wife is quite a yeah, yeah. So my wife, when she gets me, I listen. Yeah, my wife is the theology part of me.
I think that's brilliant, man. Because I didn't know about this
Yeah.
framework, but now that you say it, it does make a lot of sense. Because I've read some books about like the subconscious mind and how it also influences your um, like your body and your health. And I don't know what's your take on this, but some of these books do say that the root cause of disease lies actually in
Is
the
stress.
mind, or like,
Yeah,
yeah, or
yeah.
like
Mind,
something
mind.
else.
Or most diseases are psychosomatic. Psychosomatic mean related to the mind, right? If people are working to themselves to the bone, right, and they're getting stressed, they're going to get sick, right? You see that a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s have been like crushing it during their 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and as soon as they get 60, they're like sort of like crash, right? I see that a lot, right? Because they're constantly chasing chasing something. They're running the rat race, as most people say, the common saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Because especially what I noticed myself is the last like week or two, I had built up a little bit of extra stress, and I noticed that my energy levels dropped significantly. I mean, there was a time, and I'm curious to hear what you think the possible reason could be. where I would work in the morning. Usually I wake up at like 6, do about 4 hours of work, a little bit more, then eat, um, do some more work, exercise, and then after that, so about 3 to 4 p.m., I would come home from my workout and I would be so tired that I literally had to sleep for like half an hour. And I had this almost for a week straight. And I literally couldn't do anything other than just sleep in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you think happened there?
Well, I think it's the pride in being productive, right? We tend to put being productive as a good thing. We label being productive as good, right?
Hmm.
But remember what I said. It's not about labeling. It's as Shakespeare said, right? Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so, right? So we tend to think that being productive, being busy is good, and we think that being lazy and resting is bad, right? But the more you
Mm.
chase productivity, the more distracted you become. The more you chase productivity, the more rest you need, right? In Taoism, Zen philosophy, right? They spoke about um, when you try to be productive, you're no longer productive. When you try to be efficient, you're no longer efficient. So when you're in the flow, you're not trying to be productive. You're not trying to be efficient. You just are productive. You just are efficient, right? Again, so it's coming back to being nature, right? Being one with nature rather than fighting nature. And if you rest, you rest. Don't need to guilt yourself or shame yourself for resting, right? The more you guilt yourself for it, the more you're going to have more rest than you need, right?
Wow, that's honestly so eye-opening because it makes a lot of sense. Like the more you kind of ignore it, like you said, the more you eventually are going to need it inevitably. So that's
Yeah.
a really good point. Do you maybe have another example of that where someone is trying to be um maybe even money? Like when someone is trying to have such a desperate need for desire for money and then something ends up happening completely the opposite.
Yeah, I think for people who chase quick gains, lose money really quickly, right? I mean, you see that in the stock markets, you see that in crypto. I'm sort of guilty of that, right? So, but I realized it was not my thing very quickly. Um, you also soon understand that it's not about chasing money, but it's really about creating value for people, right? If you want to make more money, increase your responsibilities, right? I think money and value are very much correlated. It's really just about increasing your responsibilities. When you increase your responsibilities, you're delivering more value, right? There's a reason why Bill Gates and Elon Musk are one of the wealthiest because they're constantly delivering value, right? Right. Who do you know that doesn't even have a Microsoft Office, right, on this planet, right? See, that's my point, right? Most people use Microsoft Office, right? Or most people even have a computer or a phone, right? So that's a value that Apple has given us, or Microsoft have given us, or whatever. But you get what I'm saying, right? So it's really just about people who want money just keep delivering value, right? The more you chase it, the more it's going to elude you. Making money is also one thing, and managing is a different game as well, right? But the pattern I see is people who make money quickly lose it. Because my friend's in the VC space, and he tells me that the hardest money to get from, the hardest people to get money from, are the people who are the wealthiest. Because the wealthiest have know they've earned their money, right? So they're a lot more attached to it, right?
That is interesting because I do see that, and maybe this is something different to what you're saying, but that usually the people who have more money need less conviction to spend it, provided that it definitely has some value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Keep buying assets, not liabilities, right? You know that LVMH, so you know LVMH, right? They're the holding company for a lot of what is it? For luxury brands like your Gucci's and your
Hmm.
come on, just keep telling me luxury brands. It shows you I know nothing about luxury brands. But your Gucci, your Louis Vuittons, your what other luxury Burberry, but basically the whole luxury brand. Most of their clients are middle class people,
Mm.
Majority of their income comes from middle class people, right? Which is really interesting, right? It just shows you that if you want to be wealthy, it's not about spending money on those items, right? Wealthy, truly wealthy people buy assets. So that's why how I got into the property thing. That's how I got into like buying different businesses, right? The e-commerce business. That's why I want to start another business, another e-commerce business with my wife, right? That's why I want to build this app, this mental health app, right? That's why I want to keep building my personal brand on X and keep delivering this, right? Because I've studied it and now I just want to serve it, right?
That is a really good one because I don't know how long ago this was, but I kind of used ChatGPT to discover the initial conditions or like the first couple of years where Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, all these types of people, where they started their business. And with a small exception, all of them did not start with the intention of becoming super rich. For example, it was quite funny because what you said is true. Like Elon Musk, he did not start necessarily with the intention of becoming super rich, but then he did make a lot of money selling, guess it was PayPal, I think Zip2, I think it was called back then, or something else. But he bought like a really brand new car, and I think a couple of days afterwards he crashed it onto like a road. So it was quite funny because he he got the money and got this kind of like impulse, I need to buy something big, then proceeded to crash it. And I don't think that Elon Musk at this point is any man of extreme luxury at all. I think he's completely the opposite. I think he even mentioned that all of his, almost all of his money is in SpaceX and Tesla. So if they went bankrupt, he would go bankrupt too. And I think a lot of people don't know that, like how
Right.
invested he is in his
Possessions,
project. Yeah.
possessions weigh you down. I think that's what he said.
Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. So that's maybe an interesting thing as well, because a lot of people are maybe not in the stage yet where they're making some money or a lot of money. What would you say are some possible pitfalls for once you actually start making a decent amount of money? Because, like you said, making it is one thing, but keeping it is a whole another.
Mm. I just think keep providing value for people. Learn a service that you like, right? Learn a skill that you like, right? And then just keep being of service. Yeah, that's all I can say. I think the more you serve, the more money you make. I think it's really that simple. Um, yeah, I think this may hurt some people, but I think the reason why people are poor is because they don't care about humanity.
Hmm,
I'm just being
that's an
realistic.
interesting one. Yeah, because I kind of hope that the people listening do get some kind of insight from this. Because once you start to change your way of thinking to how can I serve instead of how can I make money, and I read this in a book called How to Think Like a Monk. I don't know if you read that one. Um, but basically, it makes it a lot easier because you're no longer really thinking about how you can satisfy your own desires, which makes it a lot easier to, like you said, push through certain obstacles, push through pain, because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for someone else. Um, so yeah, man, I think that's a really good point. I do want to wrap it up here. So maybe as a like a final thing, this is what I usually do. Do you have like a final, you could say, lesson or insight or whatever that you would like to share to people listening right now that can possibly save them years of struggle in their self-development journey?
I think early on in anyone's personal development journey, they'll come across the law of attraction. The law of attraction isn't what mass media says it is. The law of attraction is really simple. It's physics, really. Opposites attract, likes repel. So in other words, the law of attraction is you only attract the very opposite thing you're addicted to. So if you're addicted to peace, you're going to get war. If you're attracted to getting validation, you're going to get criticism. If you're addicted to happiness, you're going to get sadness. If you're addicted to positivity, you're going to get negative, right? If you're addicted to being productive, as you were being productive, you're going to be distracted. You're going to be lazy, right? to learn to break labels. I think that's really the big thing. Right.
I think that's a really good wrap up, because you can pretty much use this to solve anything you're probably struggling with right now. So thank you so much for that, Jerry. I also would like to thank you for coming on today. We really had an insightful chat with you. I wrote a bunch of things down, which I'm definitely going to look at in more depth after the
Thanks,
podcast as
Ross.
well. For anyone who is listening to this on Spotify or watching this on YouTube, I will link Jerry's socials in the description if you would like to check it out. And yeah, thank you so much, Jerry, once again, and looking forward to seeing everyone in the next episode.